Hi, everyone. Welcome to the GCC Talent Agenda series. I'm very excited for today's talk, the first kind of talk in 2022 and kicking off this year. And really what we're talking about today is recruiting the African diaspora. And I'm just really grateful that GCC is hosting this webinar because they have a lot of expertise in this space and they really specialize in this area. And they've just created a great forum for specialists to share their experiences and their knowledge in something that I think is really important. So I'm Bianca Pitt. I'm from a company called Further, or my feedback guru and Pulse. I am an organizational psychologist based in South Africa, in Joburg. And really what that means is I just specialize in understanding people at work. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I'm very, very happy to be here with an amazing panel. I'll let them introduce themselves because I won't be able to do them justice. But yeah, I'll start with you, Portia. Maybe tell us a little bit about you, and then we can just go around the room, the virtual room.
Great, thank you, Bianca. So my name is Portia Mbangeni. I am based in Johannesburg, South Africa as well, not too far from you, Bianca. I'm currently heading up talent and recruitment for Agreco Africa. I think for most that are online, they will know Agreco is an energy power provider. So we're in the space of power generation and cooling systems. And we have a global office that's based in the UK. So I look after the Africa business in terms of talent and recruitment.
Thanks, Portia. Olufunke?
Hi, my name is Olufunke Akinjio, and I am the Learning and Talent Management Lead for the Middle East, based out in Dubai. So that covers the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, as well as KSA with the growing business across the region. So I'm responsible for everything learning and talent management, which has to do with ensuring that, we get our people to learn and the learning is applied in their roles, and as well as from a talent management perspective, as we look at our talent, succession planning, and all that is involved in that.
Right. And Olufunke, you, if I'm not mistaken, are part of the African diaspora, so it'd be really great to actually get some anecdotal experience shares from you today. John?
Yes, thank you, everyone. And my name is John Goru. I take care of human resource. I'm actually the HR director for Africa. Butter Shoes, of course, we are shoemakers. We are operating currently in about 7 countries in Africa. I'm based in Kenya, but I think I should be moving to perhaps Johannesburg very soon, I guess. So, because that's where we want to kind of move our regional office. So I'm excited to be with you because I've done HR for fairly a reasonable period of time, of course, almost spanning about over 2 decades, across the globe. I've been in US for 6 years, working with a company there. Then I moved back to Africa, of course, through this diaspora thing. And I'm excited to be back home, I would say that. Yeah, thank you.
Amazing. So also going to get some good kind of experience shares from you, John. Dr. Jerry.
Yeah. Thank you, Bianca. My name is Dr. Jerry Gule. I am the CEO of the Institute of People Management in South Africa. We celebrating, can you believe this, 77 years this year. So we've been around for quite a while. Thank you, wow. Portia. And my role is to make sure that the HR professionals in South Africa and of course around the continent, and that organizations actually provide the right working environment for people. So we're all about people management. It's not just about HR, but if you manage people, our desire is to see you manage those people in such a way that your environment brings the best out of them. That's what we hope for, that's what we pray for, that's what we want to see, because we believe that if we do that, we will not struggle with the diaspora issue. By the way, John, I actually saw you advertising franchises being opened in South Africa, and I was saying, hey, I need to talk to these people, but it never happened. This is a couple of years ago.
Here comes me now.
Together, yeah.
I
Okay,
should
great.
be in South Africa in the next 2 weeks. So ideally, I think I'll be looking for most of you guys. Yeah. Except for Olofunke, of course, I'm looking for someone to do learning and development in Africa. So I think it's high time you moved back home.
We are recruiting already.
Recruiting the African diaspora. So just for the audience, I mean, please feel free to ask questions throughout. We'll have a look at them and we'll bring them into the conversations. We've obviously got a great distinguished panel here, so any questions that you have, they'll be super happy to answer for you. So I think kind of just to set off and set the scene, Portia, I want to ask you, what exactly is the African diaspora?
So, I mean, I think diaspora as a word, if you have to look at it in the dictionary, or explains people that are displaced, right, outside of their homeland. So from an Africa perspective, obviously, we're looking at people that are born in Africa, hopefully, or of African descent, from maybe parents, people that would have settled elsewhere outside of Africa for whatever reasons. So, I mean, at this stage, the biggest reason would be for economic purposes, either via, getting a further education outside of your current country, or getting maybe another opportunity outside of your current country. So as Olu, perhaps, and as John has done in the past. So it's usually mostly for economic reasons. So our intention, obviously, from a diaspora perspective, is to ensure that we reach out to those individuals, wherever that they are. We present the opportunities that could possibly exist within the continent that they would find interesting. So, in a nutshell, that's basically what I would describe as initiatives that we take within the diaspora.
Okay, great. Thanks, Portia. And then I guess if we think about the African diaspora, what is the business case for recruiting them back, especially back into Africa and African organizations?
That's actually, I just want to add to what Portia has said, because the African diaspora is so important. I don't want to go back to the history. How do we end up with Africans? Africans are now all over the world. Wherever you go, you find an African. It's actually quite amazing to see that. There are many, of course, we know there are many reasons for that. But as Portia rightly points out, our desire is to have the brains. We talk about the brain drain. Is the brain now coming back into to service this continent, to grow the economies of the African continent? If you can't bring those people, because they are highly skilled, some left here for educational purposes, develop themselves, and that's really the economic reasons why. Is the business case for it is that here you have the best of your best talent, right? Who can compete anywhere in the world. They've gone to those places and they've shot the lights out, right? We're saying, yes, we still have the best on the continent, but can they come back and add more value to this? And in fact, they are, ladies and gentlemen, adding a lot of value already, because if you look at World Bank studies, OECD studies, the amount of money that people send back home is astonishing. It is really astonishing. In some cases, it's higher than the FDI, the direct financial, or DFI, the direct financial investment in our countries. It comes back through the people that are in the diaspora. So there is a business case. We need the skills. Bianca, it is so sad, right? Because a lot of these countries have lost nurses, people in the health professions, or whatever your social professions, are going to the north, and we left here desperate. And there is a business case. If your nation is not healthy, you're not going to make it, right? So that's one reason. I know my colleagues can give more reasons for the business case.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you very much, Jerry. I think what you've just said cannot be overemphasized. There is a huge business case for it because and I will be speaking looking from outside looking inward. Now you have Africa as an entire continent, and I must say, I mean, the most intelligent people I have ever met in my life are Africans everywhere I have been. And this comes from years of living in the UK before moving to the United Arab Emirates. You know, the most intelligent people I have met. And, you know, it's interesting. You go to the hospitals, you go everywhere, you're meeting doctors. I'm from Nigeria, I'm from South Africa, I'm from this. The most intelligent people I have ever met are people from the African continent. However, you know, there is a huge business case to have this talent back in the region. And the reason being that, you know, we need them. We need them to drive our economy forward. We need them to transform our countries. We need them across the space. And when I kind of think about it, and I think about where I am today, and I see the amount of investment that, for example, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates is putting on, saying, do you know what? We want our talent who are Emiratis or Saudis to go to the private sector. We want you to upskill them, you know, and there is a reason behind that. There is a reason because they want to keep their talent in their country to continue growing their economy. So that is the same thing that we need to see in Africa, where there are opportunities, and we want people who have gone away to come back, make that decision. It's a huge decision to make, and you can only make that decision when you look at it and say, okay, it's worth it. Now, I mean, in my perspective and from personal experience, that was my goal, I think about 5-6 years ago. And I was really pushing to make it happen. Then you also need a cultural and a mindset shift, because then you have people who are probably coming to recruit you feeling they're coming to get my job because they're better than I am. But that's not the intent. So we need an entire shift in mindset, a shift in culture as well to make this happen, and have the opportunity to say, do you know what? If it means it's a learning opportunity for me to tap into someone else's knowledge, we need to be able to put ourselves in that position.
John, I saw you wanted to
Very good. I think, yes, yeah, thank you so much. Indeed, I just want to talk about something just within the context of what has just been said by my colleagues. And this is a personal experience on something that I did almost like about 2 years ago. On matters to do with diaspora. But in this case, what was very unique about what I was trying to get into was to find out most of the students, and I'm talking about the best of what comes out of Africa through various foundations. I'm talking about the MasterCard of this world, Equity Foundation, KCB, and various other foundations that would actually sponsor the best of the class in terms of students in quite a number of countries within Africa for studies in what we call the Ivy League, the Oxford, the Cambridge. I mean, some of the best universities, be it within the Asian continent. And apparently what caught my attention is the fact that most of these students, when they finish their various disciplines, most of them don't tend to come back home, and there are reasons for that. Out of the small research that I did, because I had to open a kind of a platform where most of them would even deposit their CVs, is the fact that they were not so sure if there are jobs available. Because remember, most of these very bright kids also come from the bottom of the pyramid in terms of family status, and therefore, Africa is at times also tends to be a very nepotism in nature as opposed to looking at people's capabilities. So most of these kids, because of the fact that from a social structure point of view, they are disadvantaged. They are not so sure if they come back home. They'll actually have those opportunities that any other person perhaps would have, either in the government sector because they have these connections or those connections, or even in the private sector. So, so most of them still ended up even perhaps doing very I would say, jobs that perhaps they are kind of even below what maybe they went to do, because maybe they have already gone out of status because they couldn't get even work visas. And even those that get work visas, obviously they'll be kind of very hesitant to come back home. So I asked myself, then what exactly do we need to do? And I think in the process of this conversation, it will be something that maybe we'll kind of look at in terms of what opportunities and what exactly can we do, to bring some of these people back home. But in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that we have a lot of our children, if I may call that, especially at my age, I think I'm entitled to that, who are actually out there in the diaspora, who are desperately looking for opportunities to come back home, but they are not sure if there is any platform that can offer them a kind of an equity of some kind that would enable them to actually access, the job market. So I think it's pretty exciting to be having this conversation. And I'm sure there are so many people who are listening to us there who perhaps even have opportunities for these young people. So thank you so much. Yeah.
I mean, I think you touch on such an interesting point around kind of unemployment and whether it's a perception or a reality, and the anxiety that people might have to come back home. And, because you see, I think, the figures in the news, I don't know what it's like kind of in the rest of Africa, but I know in South Africa, you get these kind of numbers in the news that make you feel very anxious and nervous about that unemployment rate. And yeah, I guess there's also a narrative there around concerns around if they do come back, what does prospects look like? I think that's such an interesting point. But I wanted to kind of ask you guys, how do we attract African talent in the diaspora? How do we attract them? How do we make that compelling case? What are the tools and the resources that we have available as companies and as HR professionals to actually get access to those markets around the world?
That's the
Great question.
Yeah.
Can I give it a shot, Bianca? I would say, from my point of view, it's all about the so-called employer branding. If we keep it there, do people know about our organizations, what our organizations offer? Or we go to our own website once in a while, we don't know what we're posting there. And do we actually do that? We have missions overseas, and I think we should use those missions to reach out to people, because those are the places, when I talk missions, I'm talking about your embassies, your trade, whatever official government unit you might have there. When there's these exhibitions, do we make an effort to put our brands out there to say, we are here, we want talent? But of course, Bianca, you point out, particularly for South Africa, if not for the rest of the continent, I mean, the unemployment rate is totally unacceptable. And I think across the continent, particularly for youth. So right now, I'm afraid, my colleagues, to go out and try to get the diaspora who could be, perception is they are living their best life, to try and get them back here. I'm not sure we're going to succeed. But your question is, how do we do it? I think we have to put out. We know that there are people who want to come back for various reasons. Maybe they've made, and then we can look, John, across the spectrum. There are kids and there are people who are, as we are saying, Olufu, that you're talking about doctors, you're talking about nurses. They would like to come back. But I'm sure Bianca will take us to why are they not coming back voluntarily. But it's about employer branding. What do we put out there? Is it attractive to them to come back? The policies that we have crafted for our organizations, what do we have to offer? The culture that we have in our organization. What is it that people hear about or smell about our organization? Is it attractive? Is it toxic? Do we ever find out what the perceptions of stakeholders are about our organization? Because if the employer branding is great, I think people will come.
I think
sorry.
Oh, I think I will be looking at it from a different perspective. So, I mean, I'm not very conversant with South Africa, but I will talk about Nigeria. So, for me, John mentioned talked about those that go out, their level on the socioeconomic ladder, and then they have to think about it, is it worth me going back? Now, the way I'm actually looking at it is kind of different. There's so many things, both from from the private and from the public sector, that needs to be in place for people to come back. We need infrastructures. If you're telling a doctor to come, they have to be good equipment in the hospital. They need to function as doctors. These things are physically not there. Now, when we now think about that as well, we then think about, while we're thinking about those in the diaspora, within Africa alone, we have loads of people coming out of universities every year. They don't have a job yet. And then you have people in the diaspora who are settled and coming back in that same shape. So there is a lot of challenge, to be honest with you. And this is where my thought comes in, saying there is a lot that needs to be done in looking at it and reshaping it. So when I say I'll talk about Nigeria, it's because I'm quite conversant with that. First and foremost, we have people who are in jobs that have the opportunity to inflate and change their age, which doesn't get them out of the door for retirement, for fresh talent to come in. So there is so much that needs to, while we think about the branding, I mean, if I talk from a Nigerian perspective, for example, we have the branding. We're known as the giant of Africa. We have this, we have that. We have a lot of multinationals. However, we've seen a flow where the companies are going out because of lack of infrastructure. And you cannot take a Coca-Cola, which used to exist in Lagos, to Ghana, for example, and ask such organizations to employ Nigerians when they're Ghanaians without jobs as well. So, I mean, so there is so much that needs to be done. And when I mean so much, I need a total revamp, because from the private to the public, it affects everything. And for you to tell people to come back, they need to have confidence in the system. And then from an organizational perspective, we have brought our international expertise into wherever we're working. We can talk about processes, we can talk about structure, we can kind of enforce that this is best practice. However, we're just a few of a lot. And lots of organizations. So what we need to see in Africa is organization putting best human resource practices in their organization, have a due process. Everyone needs to be treated fairly. I don't have to be treated differently because I know the CEO, or the CEO is my uncle or my cousin, and someone who doesn't have that opportunity maybe makes a mistake and is out of the door. So there's so many things. And that's why I say it requires a cultural shift and a mindset shift to the way we're currently structured and the way it is within Africa. Because if for example, someone is offering me a role in Africa, I'd have to think about it and be like, okay, there's so many questions I would ask. There's so many boxes it needs to tick. And I'm sure I'm not the only person. However, I think this needs to be fixed, or need to be seen to be fixed, for people to have the confidence in the system to say, do you know what? Okay, I want to make this move.
John, I know you wanted to say something, but I see we just got some.
Yes, exactly. I mean, Olu has kind of put quite a number of very pertinent issues which I wanted to put across. Of course, key among them is the within the government setups themselves. I mean, if I look at it, a lot, of course, has happened in Africa today in terms of having a better environment, political environment. That's exactly what I'm trying to say here, where we are seeing quite a lot of, deviation, where the government is not really interfering a lot with the private sector. In other words, leaving the business people to do business, and them kind of taking lead in terms of issues that are very important for the government to offer. In this case, I'm talking about things like security, what Olu has just talked of in terms of infrastructure, and some regulatory framework that is more business friendly. And actually, I can tell you, for example, if I take a typical example of what is happening in Africa, you'll note that we are seeing a lot of investment coming to Africa, particularly from the so-called equity funds that are even coming now to support a lot of startups. And these startups, of course, as they come on board, they kind of, because they are technology based, most of them, they in a way give us an opportunity to actually look at them as a good source of employment for the diaspora. Because remember, Africa has been lagging behind on matters to do with technology. And when we look at some of the startups that are coming in, which are basically very technology driven, the obvious thing is that the technology that they, or rather the kind of resource that they require from a human perspective, can only come from the diaspora. So I tend to think that is also another thing that is really going to drive a lot of people, or rather a lot of our people who are out there. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I can see Portia. I'm going to hop onto you now. I just want to take 2 seconds to quickly recap, because I see a lot of people in the audience have kind of joined now at the 20-minute mark. So just to kind of give the audience a quick recap on what we've covered, I won't spend too long on it for those who have listened. But we have an amazingly distinguished panel who are talking around, what is the African diaspora, and what the business case is to actually, bring people back to the continent. And then we started touching a little bit on some of the challenges. So employment, some of the, economic challenges that we might be facing to actually attract people and bring them back. And I'm going to hand over to Portia now, who I know wanted to add a little bit more context into kind of the conversation on perhaps what are the things that we need to be mindful of when we are looking to bring people back.
Yeah. So I think Bianca's and I think everyone has touched a little bit on some of the challenges and the dynamics that we deal with on a daily basis as we interact with various candidates. So I think for me, we have a responsibility to create the right environment for people to want to come back, right? That's our responsibility. So if you look at the different countries, obviously in Africa, we have, a different dynamic in every country, In South Africa, it could be a big challenge on youth employment. So obviously when you start losing youth and they want to see opportunities outside of the country, that kind of surprise you. In Nigeria, it could be maybe around the type of opportunities that are available and people wanting to, maybe there's a niche market that they want to get into that is not available in that space. So that for me then creates a bigger conversation around where do we start in creating the right environment for people to see opportunities. So obviously our government institutions have got a responsibility to say to people, listen, this is where the country is going. In order for you to find it important for you to be part of this economic growth, right? And then private sector has a responsibility to say, these are the opportunities that we are willing to create in order to get people to work and to grow the economy along with the government. So going back to what Dr. Jerry was saying in terms of, how you brand yourself as a business, how you brand yourself as a country. If you are seen to be active in the market, if you are seen to be economically active and creating opportunities. So in example, in Ethiopia, for example, where a couple of years ago, no one could have thought of Ethiopia. In the last 5 years, Ethiopia has grown immensely economically. They've created so many opportunities that then people are forced to look, to stop and look and say, well, actually, maybe I could work in Ethiopia. So that branding that Ethiopia has created for themselves in growing the economy, in growing their GDP, in partnering with private sector to ensure that people are aware of the opportunities that exist, has done a world of good. So when people are outside of the continent and they're looking at what opportunities do exist in Africa, they don't look at companies, they look at countries. They look at where can I settle? Where's the best place to live? John said, I'm moving to South Africa in the next 3 years or in the next 3 months. And I'm thinking, a lot of people tend to say that to me, to say, well, if I want to come back, can I come back to South Africa? Because it seems like I can live better there because the environment is better. The economy seems to be moving the right direction. maybe infrastructurally, I can get a bigger house. I can live in a socially acceptable environment close to what I am used to. If I'm in the US, that's a perception, right? To say South Africa is better in terms of living. However, it doesn't mean that South Africa is better. It just means that we need to position every other country as such. There are opportunities, they are available. The business case should be, have we created that environment for people to want to come back?
Bianca, I can't help myself but come in here with the branding. For instance, what Portia is saying, it reminded me of Rwanda. What they did, they put an ad, and I think when on Arsenal games, they had a partnership with Arsenal. What is that all about? That's about branding the country. So whatever Arsenal is playing, Arsenal is not my favorite team, but they play good football. All I'm saying is that, so here is a country linking themselves with a football club. Lots of people look at, watch football, and there you are branding your country. Where do you think the thing is gonna be? It's gonna be top of mind. And of course, what the politicians say also about about their country painting a good view. But seriously, what needs to happen, and Portia is so right, it's a joint effort between the private sector and the public sector, and of course, civil society. You want to create an environment where people can say, because remember, I remember I had a chance to work, to study outside outside this continent. And my wife just hated being outside the continent, because the lifestyle here, it's different. You go there, you particularly if you're a student and you have to work, but you always crave coming back and working back home, simply because of the lifestyle. So Portia is right. You can scan the continent and you say, where can I settle? But I just wanted that branding thing, because it reminded me of what Rwanda did. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting point. And I think sometimes it can feel overwhelming in these conversations when we think about all of the things that we have to get right to make a compelling case for people to kind of come back. And I think that that's on a really big, I see even comments from, I think, Jose Santiago, who says you've got to think about that kind of the infrastructure is so important. But then I also think that that's kind of a very big issue. And if we take it down to like smaller issues, what can companies do that is within their control to create opportunities for African talent to come back and I see that's aligned with a question from one of the audience who said, I'm interested in how to reach the African diaspora. For me, this has been such a big challenge. So if we think about like kind of in a business sense as HR professionals, do you have any tips or guidance on how we reach them? I don't know, through social media or any kind of avenues?
I think I would encourage that, it could be multinationals, it could be regional organizations in Africa, or just within a country, needs to engage more with the talent out external of Africa. And what that means could be, visiting universities, having open days, partnering with career departments and showcasing their organization. So it could be anything from that and many more. Will be a good idea for organizations to start thinking about and doing. Reaching out and not waiting for people the candidates to reach you, but coming out. When universities are doing their career days, or something like what careers in Africa are doing, within a seminar or something, or talk. It could be anything. So they need to kind of invest that time as well to showcase themselves, and it then speaks volumes on the value of their organization, and gives them that external view, and gives a platform as well for people to ask questions. And they should be able to answer the challenging questions and the difficult questions to help people make that decision.
I think from where I sit, I would say that the most encouraging thing is what I've seen the GCC do before the COVID-19 through the various forums that he would organize, be it in London, in South Africa, that's in Joburg. I mean, some of this in New York, and I think and I think yeah, there was one I think in Portugal or in Spain. One of those. I think I've attended quite a number, and you know, it gives us the opportunity as employers to look at the talent out there. Because I mean, Africa is very relational. What I'm trying to say is that as much as the social media technology is coming in terms of where you can deposit your CV, ideally HR has not really completely migrated to the extent where you can confidently, you know, recruit remotely and be sure that you've gotten the right talent. But you know, such forums, what they will do is they'll give us an opportunity to meet the candidates one-on-one. And I think from what I do recall, because I did recruit quite a number of people in the process, in those series, we were able actually to get very good talent. And it was also an assurance to the people that, yes, I mean, we are out there, so we are going looking for you people because we need you. And I think, in my view, that was pretty a very good fail. So my point is, from where we sit as HR professionals, we also need to create a very deliberate, move in terms of reaching out to this talent, which is really required. And I think that is where it all sits. Because we are the drivers of the entire recruitment process or resourcing, bit of it from where we sit in our organization. So I think to me it's one avenue of getting talent from out there. But remember, on the other hand, many people would look at it. Yes, I mean, if I look at what is going on in South Africa, and it's typically a replica of everywhere, where assuming that there's a good talent, but which is in the diaspora, but it's not Kenyan or even South African, but I want to transfer, or rather to put that particular talent in that country. One of the biggest challenges that we are facing today is even to acquire work permits for even our own Africans themselves. Indeed, I can tell you that in most cases, perhaps it's even easier for me to get a work permit of a foreigner, someone from Asia, be it India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or even Europe, and perhaps even other countries, than it would be for me to get a work permit of someone from Zimbabwe to actually work in South Africa, or vice versa. So, I mean, even from within Africa, and in this case, I'm talking to the government, they need to create an environment that actually encourages, inter-Africa sort of talent transfer, because that's another opportunity that also sits, even within Africa itself. And I think, to me, that would be a great thing if it can be looked at, in some of the, intergovernment forums that exist, be it from a COMESA perspective, be it SADC, be it through the African Union. I tend to think there's a space that is lost in terms of even looking from within Africa, how we can actually transfer knowledge from one country to the other. But rather, we've been looking so much in terms of capital in terms of the financial aspect of it, while forgetting that there's also another very important capital, and that is the human capital, which Africa is very rich on.
Dr. Jerry, I can see that you perhaps wanted to.
Yes, I'm itching to add to this one. And I agree with John and Olu that what we need to do, of course, we can use technology to reach out to people, but things that the Global Career Company has been doing has been fantastic pre-COVID. And let's now think, can that be done? Can GCC do these things now, possibly using platforms, other platforms to bring the talent and the employers and the talent together for the kind of exhibitions that we used to have, and call it the dating that we used to have around talent, and people hopping from that platform to that table just to hear what does this employer have. So we need to think about that. But I wanted to add even more, Bianca. I'm just thinking, do you actually need the diaspora to come back in a world of work where people can work from anywhere? You can work from under a tree, under a bridge, in a restaurant, on top of the roof, in your penthouse. Do we really need to be bringing them back here? Can we be more creative around the skills that we need and how those skills can serve us using, you know, 4IR is here. Well, people are talking about 5IR now. So how can we harness this technology where you don't need people to be physical on the ground? You may need people on the ground. I don't dispute that. There are jobs where you need to be there. You can't do it remotely. But can we think creatively within the box, although some people will say outside the box, to use this talent? I mean, I was talking to a fellow who said, John, coming back to your issue of permits, work permits, and it's stupid of our governments, man. I don't understand this mentality where you know, there is something that, and I know some people are going to shoot me down for this, but there is something about being African that sometimes it just boggles my mind, some of the stupidity that we undertake and put great effort at just creating hurdle. We now have the African Free Trade Agreement that came into effect. We need to make that thing live. You know, we need to make sure that that thing is actually happening for the talent that we have on the continent to exchange. There is absolutely no need for some of these barriers that you create. We want in Africa, but we know we're the ones that are standing and blocking every path to make this thing work and work well for us. But again, Olu, you may want to add, Bianca, John, I just think we can tap onto this African talent that is everywhere in the world. We don't have them. We don't have to give them passport to come here. But of course, that poses challenges for the lawmakers, the taxmen, because how do you deal with those kinds of things? So it creates a different dynamic. But that would be my view, that we can access this talent and use it effectively wherever it sits today.
Yeah. I do agree with that. And you know, something just caught my eye, you know, the questions that's come saying government should invest heavily in learning institutions. You know, that is through and really important. You know, when I kind of think back and I see that, you know, some universities haven't changed their syllabus for years. You know, they're still the same thing, and we've moved past that. And you know, we need to say, you know, the government needs to look at our talent right from the beginning, you know, where they're getting educated. Organizations that are in place need to make it flexible for people to do internships, to be able to add, you know, get that physical experience as compared to the classroom experience as well. So I think there's so much that needs to be done. And you know, and it needs to start now to create that platform for people to say, you know, because I think we have, like John said, the children, you know, the children are having children, and then, you know, the children are having children, and we want to be able to tell them, do you know what, you can go and work in South Africa, you can go and work in Ghana, you can go and work in Nigeria. The question they would ask you is, why didn't you go? You know, they'll ask you, why didn't you go? Why didn't you go? You know, so I mean, and I think I'm actually speaking the truth, because, you know, when I think about my nieces and I'm saying, do you know what, you can go and work in Nigeria, you know, you can work in Nigeria, she would ask me, why can't you go, why don't you go and work there, you know? So that is what the questions you will get. Or is it someone whose daughter is a doctor, and maybe a doctor in the United States or in the UK, you know, and you're asking, do you know, why don't you go and give back? She's going to ask, oh, mom, why didn't you go and give back as well? Or why didn't you go back as well? So I think as we look at it, it's becoming more of a problem, as, you know, the older we grow, our kids are abroad, you know, then they lose their roots totally. And, you know, I think so it's something that needs to be addressed as a continent, you know, ensuring there are no barriers. And like you said, John and Jerry, you know, in terms of the barriers, the work permit, you know, you're coming from here, you cannot come here. It's taking 6-8 months to get your work permit, to be able to work. I think we need to cut those things off for us to function effectively as a continent.
Yeah, I loved what Dr. Jerry also said around you can still bring the skills without bringing the person, and that's what technology. And I think if we look at a silver lining of COVID, has made us a little bit more flexible in terms of how we think of those things. And a lot of what thinking is, has this been done successfully elsewhere that we can kind of look and take learnings and replicate? And while I don't know a lot about this, so I could be wrong, I think Israel does it quite well. They offer, if you are Jewish, to go back, I think, with like tax breaks, and they set you up for a set number of years. I mean, I'm not 100% clued up. I've heard it in passing, but I mean, I think it's interesting to also look at other countries who might have done it successfully, and why, and what learnings we can take from them. But I think
I lost connection for a bit there. I'm back. I think I caught a little bit of what everyone else was contributing on. I think one of the other reasons that we need to look at economically, it is challenging for a lot of companies to match salaries of people that have been away for a while. So we've got to also have, just a think around if a person is outside the continent and they've obviously, progressed to a certain level and they're operating in a completely different environment. What is it that we've got to put into consideration for us to bring them back effectively without breaking the bank? Because I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges we have. And then, I mean, that's my everyday challenge, the skill is there, it's available. We can have great conversations about the person coming back. Now, if I have to start tallying up and I start to talk to my business leader about what it will cost for us to bring that person back, then the conversation shifts. Because we're in business, so we are trying to make money, at the same time trying to acquire the right talent. But I can guarantee you that I've had to let go of a lot of good, skilled individuals based on just affordability and budget. So that's also quite a hot topic at the moment, that we tend to move away a little bit from discussing, because we don't want people to think we cannot afford them, because that's not the case. I think depending on what it is that you're looking for, and you rightly said, there are maybe creative ways where you can start looking at things where, especially with remote work and COVID, but how effective is it? Because in essence, the reason we're trying to hire somebody in Africa is because we need somebody in Africa. We need them to be part of the society. We need them to experience, the day-to-day, and we also need them to socialize back into the continent, and that's what we need. So, with Olu being in the UAE, how effective will she be to the people on the ground if she is not seeing them on a daily basis, and how close will she be to the social issues that we deal with, right? And those are the things that we need to look at. So my biggest problems on a daily basis is always those, amongst others, it's at the top of the list is always those affordability. You're great, but can I afford you? Secondly, if I can afford you, then bring you back. How can I socialize you back into the environment? I think Oli also touched a little bit on that, around how do you bring people back and create that right environment socially for them? Because a lot of the people that do come back, it's difficult. They've left the continent where maybe they were still even young, or some of them were not even born in the continent. How do you socialize people back in this environment again?
True. I think there's also the new buzz around, diversity and inclusion, that is going around, now in the HR circles. And, key among them, of course, is also to make sure that we create some diversity around the the talent that otherwise was very foreign in nature, and therefore forcing us from where we sit in as HR to actually look out there, opening, our broader, search, in terms of talent, and more so now, most of the organizations insisting that they want to have an aspect of a lot of people, being African particularly, occupying certain positions. And I can see there's already a drive towards that. And from where I sit in Bata, we are doing it. And I've seen it happen with the Diageo of this world. I've seen quite a number of other organizations do it, Coca-Cola and others. And what I'm trying to say here is that we are kind of also seeing a situation where we are also exporting talent, to Europe. And to me, it's another way of trying to leverage, to tell people that as much as, of course, we are also attracting people to come, but we've also grown enough talent in terms of skills and experience that actually we can donate to even the developed world. Typically, that shows that the job market is also growing in terms of what I can say is very experienced talent that is also being appreciated even elsewhere. So that's really a very good, comfortable position where we're trying to create a balance and trying to position Africa not really very disadvantaged to the extent where we can only be desperate to only look for talent from out. But equally at the same time, we've got talent that we can actually give. And multinationals should actually take a lead on that. Because you see, when you are doing that, you're also kind of also creating another opportunity for somebody else. Because when you're taking that talent out there, it means that you have already created an opportunity for someone, either to come from the diaspora or even from within, the African continent, to occupy those positions. So, like I said from the word go, the HR, professionals have a huge role to play in terms of balancing this aspect of either brain drain, or for that matter, even the aspect of attracting talent by creating all the enablers that are critical, be it the cultural fit aspect of it, be it, creating that brand that Jerry talked of, and of course, finally, making sure that we engage all the relevant bodies within the context of employability, to come in and help us, bring this talent back home. The other argument, of course, someone was saying that, look here, I mean, some of our young people, they'll all will say, yeah, now it's time for me now to start a family. And then you say, oh yeah, then where do I do it? Do I go back home, or do I bring this guy home where I am? And I think we've seen also part of that also contributing a lot to most of the diaspora also coming back home. But you see, that can only happen when they also know that the infrastructure that is available back home can resonate with what I can say is their way of living, their standards of living. Be it the housing bit of it, is it decent? Is it affordable? Do we have the right infrastructure in terms of other things that would attract this talent? So I think there's so much that needs to be done by both the private sector and the government sector to make sure that we attract this talent. Thank you.
I think we've had such an amazing conversation. I feel like we could keep going for a number of hours. I'm almost glad there's a time limit, otherwise we wouldn't be able to stop. But just the audience, you can. I've got the questions that you've asked. I've kind of popped to one side, and I'll ask if you have more, please put them through. But in the last kind of 6 minutes, I mean, we've spoken around the challenges, we've spoken around the benefits, some of the ways that we can attract talent. If we've got HR professionals in the virtual room who are now wanting to actually recruit the African diaspora, what would each of you say is kind of the best place for them to start, and some of the things that they need to be thinking about to make this a reality for them and kind of give them a practical take home from this conversation. I'd love all your inputs.
Yeah. So I'll start. I think partnerships, that's important. You've got to just really find a way where you can reach people at their most comfortable, right? So people are not going to always come to you, especially the best talent. They're not always going to come to you. So try and create those partnerships with the right or relevant bodies that will get you closer to the talent. So universities, as always mentioned, we have a lot of postgrad universities all around the world that we partner with, where we have a much quicker way of reaching the talent and a much quicker way of having very fluid conversations, because all of the questions that people have cannot just be answered by looking at your website or sending you an email. You know, we're too busy to answer all the emails, but if you create the platforms where people can actually have this platform, for example, where people can have a Q&A with you directly as a business, because the information they need will most likely come from that discussion, right? So I think those partnerships are very important. Find out exactly where your talent is sitting across the world. Find out why they're sitting there. You know, get a little bit of that intel for yourself in terms of the dynamics of why they are sitting there. What are the challenges they would have in coming back, and address those issues directly with them.
I think I would like to add to what Portia said, because as she was speaking, I think, when we look at, and, Jerry has talked about branding, when we think about the McKinseys, the Accentures, the KPMG, why are they different? That's because they go to look for the talent. They don't wait for the talent to come to them. And what Portia has said, partnerships with universities. Something just popped into my mind, and that was, organizations can set up a postgraduate program in their organization. And what does that mean? While you have a graduate program which helps you recruit graduates, what about, or a junior leadership academy, and then you're looking at people from the diaspora, that you get them into your organization on this, through this platform. And then you have a situation, maybe it runs for 2 years, and then, you integrate them, gently into the culture of the organization. So, having this partnership, setting up things like this, going out there, collaborating with organizations like, GCC and a lot of other ones like that, to get those talent. I think we need to get out of the continent and go, rather than stay in the continent and wait for them to come, because the talent's not going to come.
Very,
Yes.
very interesting.
Yes.
Let me add,
Yes,
John, before you. I'm older than you, so I can take the privilege. All right. So yeah, I agree with what my colleagues have said. But I think as an HR professional, one of the things that you need to do every time to add value to your organization, you need to make sure that you understand what your critical skills for your organizations are. You must have that list, because part of what you want to do is to look. I would tend to think we've all spoken about unemployment in our countries. It's high. So you really, when you are going to hunt for talent and bring talent from overseas, you want to make sure that you have exhausted your internal market, right? Now you need to go out and find that, because there's a critical shortage at a certain level. So that list must be, it's something like you must also look at it every month, right? Where will we need this? Because to source those skills is not going to take you a week. So I think have your critical skills list. That's a practical thing, so that then you would know where to go. I would add that at universities, you are not just firing, praying and spraying. What you are doing, we are focused. Look at the alumni offices, for instance. Those would be great. And remember, that's where you're going to find these people, because they come together. I mean, in South Africa, with the Harvard Alumni Association, you can use that. Talk to your employees about people that they know are overseas and possibly are itching to come back. So do the town hall around talent acquisition, even within your own employee body. Ask them, who do you know, your neighbors, your friends, your own kids that are overseas, maybe are itching to go. Because don't hide the stuff. You want people to know that's what you are looking for. Your employees are your ambassadors to find you the skills that you need. But it must be based on your critical list of that. Talk to the chambers of commerce. Talk to your missions, as I've said, your ambassadors, the people that are doing. I mean, South Africa is the SA. Proudly South African, and we have someone who sits in the UK, Pumelela. She can help us to find talent because people go to that place. I mean, let me just bring this in, Bianca. Yesterday, I listened to Dave Urik and his wife, Wendy, talking about the crisis in Ukraine, what's happening to talent there, what HR can do with that talent. Because the talent is moving out, but it's available. These are people that are experienced and they can be accessed. What is HR doing to assist? He said a lot of other things. All I'm saying, let's keep our eyes peeled. Let's think out of the box. Let's use all sorts of things that can bring the talent that we talk to foundations. Those are the people that send people out. Talk to them to bring them back. Partner with people. Lastly, talk to GCC, our partners.
Thank you. I think yes, I couldn't agree more with what each one of us has said. To be very honest, the issue of attracting, a talent in this continent, it's got to be very deliberate. It's not something that you just do it by chance. As an organization, you must purpose, to do it. And I think from where I sit, the only thing that I can say is to encourage the HR professionals and various bodies within the HR profession within the continent, actually to kind of consciously, deliberately go out there and bring that talent back home. Which options do we have? Like I've said again, obviously, the issue of us just posting jobs there is not enough. Is even after you post, it's for you to ensure that even out of your shortlist, I mean, the same way today we are looking at inclusion by saying that out of every job that you've advertised, a certain percentage must be women. So that's a deliberate move because the more you have within your shortlist, it indicates that already consciously you know what you're trying to target. And I think this is one area that as HR professionals, we need to look at as and when we advertise positions out there. Participation in various forums, like Jerry has said, I think is a must for me. If indeed we are to attract a talent. And I'm excited by what GCC has been doing. And the only thing that I can say is, again, to encourage more recruitment agents also to do the same. And finally, of course, is a lot of organizations in Africa adopting best practice. Not just talking about it, but actually walking the talk. When you say that these are the bare minimum that we should have as an organization, obviously you should live to that because by the end of the day, our employees are the best ambassadors. They will talk good about the organization. That way, of course, the diaspora will listen because they already know that these people are already inside. And even perhaps the diaspora team that also come in and join the organization, they will also say, yeah, this is a great organization to work for. And that way, of course, word will go out there and we'll be able to harness that talent. So, and then finally, of course, I want to talk, like I said from the beginning, of various foundations that are sending our children out there. And we're talking about the best of what is available, in terms of brains. I think it's upon them to also, partner with other organizations within the continent to come up with programs that either would observe these people as interns, for some internship programs, management trainee programs, or even kind of mentorship programs that we can actually have within that context. And the government also to give some incentives to the private sector so that they're encouraged actually to bring in these people, or rather to absorb them in the job market. And in this case, I'm talking about the trainee programs. So thank you so much. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Such great insights. Oh, sorry, Olufunke.
If you don't mind, just for a minute, because I saw a question pop here. And it reads at Olufunke, KPMG and other global companies can do this with some ease compared to small businesses or new startups. How can you help this? I don't have all the answers. However, I would recommend that while we think about talent in the diaspora, we also have good talent in Africa. So we need to start harnessing and nurturing what we have in the continent as well. And that could mean, as the organization provide internships to students in universities. As a startup, we still have people coming out with first class and the brains of the brains in Africa. You can harness that as well as that starting point, because sometimes as Portia said, you might not be, you probably won't afford or be able to pay, talent coming from the diaspora. So we need to look inward as well as we try to get those external in, but we also need to look inward and create those opportunities for those that are in the continent as well.
Yeah, great point. So we don't lose more people, so also create opportunities within. I've got a question here, so I'm going to try get through all of them, or as many as we can. So someone has said, do HR teams follow up with students being trained abroad? Students abroad struggle to reintegrate in Africa after their studies and end up just staying abroad. How can employers help with reintegration?
I struggle with that quite a bit, to be honest, because I don't believe it. I honestly don't believe you need reintegration. I think what you need is people that are going to come in and do the job, right? That's the one thing. But in order to do the job, you've got to understand the environment that you're in, right? If you then paying too much attention to how do we integrate these people, because then you've got to do the same for everybody else. You've got to really start creating all these special programs in order for. So what John has mentioned here is that if you've got a very solid diversity and inclusion program within the business, right? That should be your foundation to be able to create any sort of integration initiative, right? So in my previous environments, for example, we would do different things. We'd form forums within the company, all in the name of D&I, and we would say, how do we tackle certain issues within those forums? So how do we tackle the gender equality issue? How do we tackle diaspora issues in there? How do we tackle socialization? How do we tackle, just even the smallest thing that you can think of, which is, how do you tackle somebody moving from one province to the next, from one state to the next? How do you socialize them? And we're not talking about people that are coming from overseas. We're talking about somebody who's here. How do you socialize them into an environment? How do you socialize people that speak different languages? So once you have that in place within the business, then you can start solving some of these problems. If a student is coming from a university wherever else in the world, right? There are programs within universities that are built to integrate and socialize people of different cultures, right? So we assume that the university would have started with those programs. All what we then need to do when we bring them into our environment is to ensure that that continues, and the lessons are cascaded to everyone else in the business. So I think that's how I would solve it, in terms of integration. If you have those right programs in the business, then you'll be able to solve those problems easily.
Great. Thanks, Portia. We've then got another question that came through that said, as employers, are we engaging education institutions to upgrade and focus more on STEM and other kind of areas for the future?
I think that is something that, from within the continent needs to be looked at. And and I say it with a very big smile on my face, because, at this stage, and as we think about the skills of the future, what we need to see is organizations partnering with universities to drive innovation, to collaborate with them. That is what we need to see. And like I said previously that some of the institutions, I could go back to University of Ibadan and my professor is still going to show me the kind of handouts I use maybe 7, 8 years back and it's still being used. That doesn't drive for innovation. And we see that a lot. And when you think about people coming out of Africa, going abroad to study, I must say the first 2, 3 months, you're struggling. You're struggling to adapt to the high level of expectation as it compares to where you're coming from. So we need to start seeing that collaboration between educational institutions as low as secondary school or high school or whatever it's termed in across the region. That collaboration needs to start happening, and that drives innovation, because when we see, I mean, if you go to Silicon Valley, for example, the kids that live in Silicon Valley, at a very young age, they can tell you, oh, do you know what? I'm trying to couple this thing together. They don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something. However, we don't see that in Africa, and that's because the private, the government organizations are far away from our educational institutions. But what we see around the world is a very close collaboration. We see universities partnering with oil and gas company. How do we talk about sustainability? How do we do this? And you see the university students coming up with ideas. That is what we want to see, and that is what is going to drive innovation, and that is going to up our game as well and allow the world to take us seriously.
Just one little point here, and it is happening, and I'm privileged to sit in what is called in South Africa the Human Resources Development Council, chaired by the Vice President of the country. They actually, one of the things, and we have, for instance, the Vice Chancellor of UCTs running one of the working groups, and they've been talking about STEAMA, which is the science, tech and maths, as well as the arts, because what you are doing, so they're talking about integration of this, so you don't just focus on one thing, but because creativity is the thing, and where do you get creativity? In the arts. So bringing that all together, it's not just STEM, but STEMA, which is quite exciting to see, and hopefully these institutions will get close to each other.
Excellent.
So there's two questions that I'll kind of combine because they are similar. Oh, we lost Olufunke. In the last kind of 3 minutes that we have. So the questions were around perhaps organizations and businesses not doing kind of their bit recently. So someone said that in COVID across kind of Africa, but I do think it's global, people had cut salaries, and why have those not been brought up to standard if we're wanting to retain and attract African talent? And then the other question was around the selection process, and perhaps making it a little bit more clear that this is open to the African diaspora to encourage people to apply. So I guess those two, the question, if I could summarize them, is around businesses perhaps learning to be a little bit more accountable for some of the decisions they make and a little bit more clear around what those expectations are. So I don't know if there's any kind of closing thoughts on those two questions.
Well, just to go back to the issue of salary cuts and the effects of COVID, which are purely very global, because I guess even one of the things that made a lot of organizations take that option was, do we lay off people or do we retain them and pay them something, for their own living or upkeep? And I would say, yes, Africa is just coming out of the woods. Indeed, actually, I would say Africa compared to the rest of the world, COVID was not as bad as people thought it would be. But I think that is by the grace of God. I mean, even right now, if we look at the vaccination rate and, compared to the global, reach in terms of, the vaccine, we are still way below. But while that is happening, I think the positivity rates are already almost in some countries below even 1%. So I don't think I would say that is courtesy of vaccine, but I think it's just nature by itself. And I think that's a good reason for people to come back home because it's safer here, just by the way. However, I think like we just said from the beginning, best practice is everything. I mean, just being reasonable, and HR is a clear driver of that. while of course looking at the business, exigencies, you should be able to balance the two. And HR becomes as a good arbitrator of that situation by advising business accordingly. That if you are to retain and even attract, there are certain things that you always must put into consideration at any given time. So it's a very difficult question really to answer, because I guess it is from one organization to the other. And again, it also depends with the culture, which I think I've seen a lot of comments around, the aspect of culture. And Jerry did talk, passionately about the issue of brand, the corporate brand. And that's why it comes in, because for sure, if you're going to treat people badly, they are not going to treat you good, because ultimately they'll exit. So I think that's what I can say as far as that particular issue is concerned.
Thank you, John. And that kind of brings a wrap our Q&A. Apologies for the questions we didn't get to, but yeah, I think just a really insightful session. And thank you to each of you for just sharing your experiences and your knowledge with all of us here. And yeah, my hope is that everyone in the room can kind of take out some good lessons in recruiting and working with the diaspora. So thanks to our panelists, thank you to the audience, and thank you to GCC for putting this together. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great